All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Coral Movasseli. Thank you so much for joining me today for my talk. Hello, or Gia Giut. I tried my best. I do have an Irish partner, and I lived in Ireland, so I should know this. But I am a work in progress with that. Actually, just to go back for a second. So you might be wondering where my accent's from. I'm from Toronto. I am a social scientist by trade. I have my Master's of Science from the London School of Economics. I started my career in public policy, actually in international trade. I used to work for the Foreign Office in Canada, a long way to where I am now. I ended up going into industry, into the private sector, working for private equity funds after I studied in London and continued on in business consulting. And then I got into tech kind of by accident. I built an app, a digital application with a friend of mine, and we launched it on the market and it went well. And then I ended up working in product for retail banks, for Accenture's Digital Innovation Center, for fintechs in London. And that's where the story started. And for me, behavioral psychology was a term that I'd find quite a lot in marketing decks, especially when, fintech products or a lot of, startups would be using that term to kind of market their product to their clients and their customers. And I always wondered, what does that actually mean? And how are we actually applying that? So I started really digging into what behavioral psychology is and what does that mean in its application in product design? And then what can we take away from it? So that's what I'm going to cover in my talk today. So how many people in this room know what behavioral psychology is? Is there a few hands. And how many of those people have applied behavioral psychology to designing products? Not one hand. Okay, all right. Okay, so that's where we're starting from. No worries, but I'm going to cover it as best as I can. So behavioral psychology is the study of observable behavior. And that's the discipline itself. And what that means is it's all about your, the external things that you'd be doing, like emotions, like, any sort of action you take. It's all of that external stuff. It's nothing internal or inward like your thinking, whether consciously or subconsciously. And it's not that behavioral psychologists dismiss that humans have minds and there's this inward thinking, ability. It's just that we can't really know what people really think, and we can't really know for sure. So for them, it's something that it's not to be dismissed, but you can't measure it. So the way we want to understand people and human beings is really through their observable actions. That's what we can measure empirically. The discipline itself was really the grandfather of it all was John B. Watson. He's a behavioral psychologist, and he worked off, a lot of the work behind Ivan Pavlov. He was a Russian psychologist, and he's known for really, a lot of conditioning work. And he's known for his experiment with the dog, which is really where he was trying to get an idea whether a stimulus would then, bring about an equal reaction or a response. So what he did was he would bring a bowl of dog food in front of a dog, and that was the stimulus, and then the dog would then salivate, and that is then the response. So that's really that behavioral conditioning that Pavlov worked on. And our guy here, John B. Watson, he worked off the work that Pavlov did, and he took it a step further to understand how can that be applied to human beings in any way. Can we condition human beings to act a certain way, behave a certain way, depending on the stimulus that we bring to them? And can we condition that in any way? So what he did and what he's known for is this little Albert experiment. And I'm not going to go into the ethics of it, but I'll tell you about it. So essentially, he got little baby Albert. It was this wee little baby. He was 9 months old. And what he did was he brought a lot of different stimulus around him. So he brought a white rat, a bunny, a monkey, a burning newspaper for some reason, these freaky masks, and he brought all this near wee little baby, Albert, and no reaction at all. So he's like, okay, so this baby has no reaction to any of the stimulus. And then what he tried was he actually then brought the white rat, and then with the white rat, he would then bang on with this, with this hammer on this, this metal-like film, and to just make this really loud noise. And then he realized, okay, well, the baby's now having a reaction, it's frightened. And then what he did was he would do this repeatedly, and then he would bring over the white rat near little baby Albert, and the baby would then, expect that there was going to be this loud, annoying noise, and he would get scared just by having the rat near him. And then eventually the baby would just start crying whenever the rat was around without the noise involved. So then what he realized, our guy John B. Watson, was that there is then a way to behaviorally condition human beings through the use of stimulus. To prompt different behavioral responses. So that's what behavioral psychology is in a nutshell. Raise of hands, do we have a better idea of what it is? Okay, awesome, okay. But what are the guiding principles? Because behavioral psychology can be used by UX designers and really anyone when they're designing anything or building any sort of products to solve problems, to see how do we get people to take a certain action that we want them to do, and how do we get them to do that? So I'll take you through some guiding principles fairly quickly. The first thing is you want to draw the user in. You want to make the experience memorable, and you want to stand out. And Apple is a really good example of this, because even just think of the I don't know how many people in this room have an Apple product, but I'm sure many people do. I have a lot of Apple products, including an iWatch. I don't know why I'm promoting Apple right now, but they're very good at this. And this is why I bring it up, because even just the whole unboxing experience with the MacBook or any of their products, it's really memorable. It stands out. It makes it memorable. It stands out. It's a really good feeling for the user, and it makes them want to unpack the product and get it started. Next thing you want to do is you want to support the user, and you want to guide them through that process, and you want to make sure that you guide them through their decision-making process as well. So for example, like Duolingo is very good at this. So when you sign up to their app, you have to take this test, this placement test, and they guide you through the whole step to see where you would be, where you would fall in your language ability. And humans are conditioned to do what they're asked if the instructions are really clear and simple. So Duolingo is a really good example of this. The third thing is don't frustrate the user. Sounds simple, right? Well, don't frustrate them. Don't make it vexing. Don't make things too long. Human beings are not will let something go if it's too frustrating or if it's too complex. So Amazon's a really good example of this, because they have this buy now with one-click feature, which allows their more advanced customers who buy quite frequently to just buy on one click. It takes out all the different steps in between where you have to go through all these different pages to buy a product. So that's really simple, and it gets the user to do the action that they want them to do, which is to buy products. Next thing you want to do is you want to track the behavior. So how do you know how do you know that what you need to do to get a certain reaction from a user? So what you need to do is you need to track that behavior. And companies have gotten really good at this, especially when it comes to rewards, right? You want to reward, when people are rewarded, they're more likely to come back to you, and they're more likely to complete that action again and again. Marks & Spencer's is really good at this. I bring this up because I use the Sparks app. I go to Marks & Spencer's quite often. I love them. And they always have these offers there, and those offers are tailored. I'm pretty sure are tailored to me and what I buy. And I have to go in their app. I have to do the action of taking that offer and putting it into my profile so that I can then use it. And they're very good at it because I'm motivated to do it because I want a discount on the products that I buy regularly, and they're rewarding me. And that's a really good way to do it. There's a lot of different theories about, how to get people using behavioral psychology to do what you want them to do. And our guy here, Dr. B.J. Fogg, he's a Stanford University behavioral psychologist. He's done a lot of work and thinking around this. And what he's come up with is the FOG behavioral model. So named after him, not hard to remember. And what he says is that there are 3 different elements that need to be in place for you to get an action or a response from someone. The first thing is motivation. So it's what are the underlying reasons that someone wants to do something? What are the prompts that motivate people? The second thing is ability, and this has nothing to do with someone's skill level and such. It's really to do with how difficult is it for them to do what you want them to do. The third thing is prompts. So this can be external. So external as in like things in your environment, like noises and sounds or smells that trigger a reaction or a response. Or it could be internal, so anything that there might be some thoughts that trigger a certain response element. I think the best example of this is, well, hunger. If I'm famished, I'm really hungry, I want to go typically have a cheeseburger. So our guy, BJ Fogg, he says that you need these 3 elements in order to have an action. And this is a model that he came up with. And essentially, if you don't have these 3 elements in place, then you're not going to get the action that you want from the user. And you might be thinking, well, okay, it's great that we have behavioral psychology, trying to better understand humans and why they do certain things. And then also, how do we then condition them to do what we want them to do? Aren't there any underlying ethics behind this? Because you can essentially manipulate people and deceive people. Well, yes, there is a whole research and body that is dedicated to that and better understanding it. And Nir Eyal, who is he's an Israeli-American author. He wrote a really good book called Hooked. And what he talks about is that habit-forming products need to alleviate user pain by relieving a pronounced itch. They are not there to manipulate people. And what he's come up with is the manipulation matrix. And essentially what you want to make sure of is that you're in that facilitator box and no other box there. Because you want to make sure that and how you make sure that you are in the facilitator box is if your product is something that you're going to use and if it materially improves the user's life. And if that's the case, then you're good. If not, you're not good, according to Nir Eyal. 1,841 is the number of dark patterns that Princeton University came up with when they scoured the web. They looked through over 11,000 websites, and this is a number of dark patterns that they found. And dark patterns are essentially user interface design that is meant to coerce and manipulate people to take a certain action without them really knowing that they're being manipulated or coerced into. And when they did this research, they also found that there were a number, I believe over 20 or 22 companies who were actually providing dark pattern as a service on the internet as well for companies. And I mean, this is not atypical these days. I think we've all come across companies who've used who've used manipulative or coercive user design interface techniques to get you to do certain things. It was just recently that the New York Times published a report about several different startups, several different products that essentially were using that method. So for example, there was one company that essentially what they did was they created fake users, so users that didn't exist, and they would then make it seem like that they were purchasing things and doing things and had a lot of activity in order to then prompt their customers to then purchase more products on their website. So then if you feel like, oh, well, there's a number of people purchasing this product, then I'm going to do it too. I think we all see that when we're booking like hotels and flights these days sometimes. And Stephen Wendell, who's a behavioral psychologist, would agree, and he says that he's challenged anyone, you, to think of 3 major digital companies that don't try to trick you into giving consent to using your data, sign up for things you don't want, or encourage you to binge on their products despite your better judgment. And he's come up with an ethics checklist to make it really simple and easy for you. First thing is, don't create addicts. Don't create products that will get people addicted. That's not what you want to do. That's not good. The second thing is be transparent. Make sure that your user knows why they're taking a certain decision and they're not being coerced into it. So be transparent about what you're doing and guide the user, going back to the guiding principles, guide the users through that and make sure that they're giving informed consent to what they're doing. And lastly, thank you so much for letting me speak on this topic. I really appreciate it. Do keep in touch. You can follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter at Coral_S_Reef. And, you know, let me know how you enjoyed this talk. And if you want to know of some like book recommendations around this topic, follow me. I'll be posting later on today several different books that I think would be good to advance and further your knowledge as you go into this discovery phase. And yeah, so thank you so much. Thanks for having me.